Buluvinaka, Nwaya, Namaste. Talofalava, Halowantok, Konameri, Wakatalofalahi Atu, Aloha, Malolele, Kemneben Nameri, Halo Olketa. Greetings from our Pacific ancestors. We also acknowledge the presence and we also acknowledge the sacred space that has been given by the Ghana people for us to share our narratives on the I-Talitali framework, to share our narratives on improving the RSD for our people. And I speak of the Pacific people. We are a team, as you can see, we are all matched up in our chambers from the University of the South Pacific, and 4 of us of the 6 are here on a project that we took on to bring in a Pacific infusion into the RSD. I'm just going to introduce, and then you will see me at the end again, just to conclude, and my team members will enlighten you, hopefully, will enlighten you on our input into the RSD. And we are called the I-Talitali team. That is an Itoke word that refers to weaving or to weave. And that is the underlining theme that we have, merging the RSD into the PRSD, which we will talk about later. This is Chokapevi with a TH sound for the C, and that's Narsamma and Lalita. And I'm Rosarina, and we are all from Fiji. That's your variety. Okay, we are the UU204 teaching arm of Pacific Studies that has integrated RSD into our teaching. We embarked on a project where we relooked at, we looked into rethinking, reconstructing the RSD and researching into research, where we felt that there was a Pacific content element missing in the RSD. So we have, in that project, come up with a weaving as an art and used the mat metaphor to infuse into the RSD processes of research, because we felt that that was one element that could answer to the demands of higher education and the demands of incorporating into the learning process the context of where the students are learning from. Their backgrounds were important, are important, and so does the teaching and learning staff input. So that's basically our project of the I-Talitali team, weaving a concept, a framework into the RSD. So again, I reiterate the demands of the higher education into University of the South Pacific as an example, where they tried to incorporate into the undergraduate courses the research element that would provide, in the bigger picture, quality researchers and quality questioning people, critical thinking people, into researchers into themselves to create a Pacific consciousness. And that is the framework on which the team will elaborate on. It is not lacking attention in learning, but we have come in the angle that it is not having it is insufficient in the context of understanding where our students come from and to capitalize on that into the research concept framework, as in Spratt and Veikune. So we again reiterate the context-dependent local nature weaving. We chose weaving and mat metaphor because that is matting, weaving, Pacific. You sit on a mat, you have the mat as your wall, you have the mat as your house. It's a familiar concept to Pacific students. And we come from 12 different nations, thus the greetings in the beginning. And my team will add to that. We have a local saying that we call our students to the mat to sit, and we start our research. We start our talanoa, we start our narratives, we start our sharing in research. So I call you to sit on the mat, and my friends will take us on that journey of weaving RSD to PRSD. For Yaxia.
In Pacific Studies, we value traditional and indigenous knowledge. So now that you're sitting on a mat, I will have to move you from the mat, and we'll go out and harvest the raw materials required for weaving a mat. So just when you begin to get comfortable, I'm sorry, I'll have to get you out of your comfort zone, and we'll go out to the marshy area to harvest the materials that we need. Now, what I have done, and I won't be able to go through this, but I've on purpose, in acknowledgement of the knowledge of weavers, I have put their voice out there. In the Pacific, there are two main materials that are used for weaving. One is called kuta. It's a type of flax that grows in marshy area, also used by Maoris in Northland, New Zealand. And we have pandanus that is mostly used by oceanic communities near the ocean, because that's where it grows. So you have the inland material called kuta. You have pandanus that's located near the sea. And I'm focusing on kuta in particular here. So I'm just going to kind of like scroll forward. This talks about how you identify, you have a mind map where you identify your resource area, and then at the right time you go out and harvest, and there is a certain way that kuta is harvested. So I'll probably just go through the pictures very quickly. Right over there, that's the place where you harvest your kuta from. It's not a pretty place. It's pretty messy and muddy and dirty. Yeah, so that's what students need to do. They need to identify their research areas, and research is a messy process. You cannot always know the end from the beginning, and that's what we tell the students. When you go out and harvest kuta, be prepared for the messy stuff. When you harvest the kuta, you can't just harvest anything. Okay, sorry, I don't have time for this, but you can always go back to the first slide where it talks about the type of stem or the type of stalk that you cut. There are certain types. Once it's cut, it's carried a certain way, upright so that it doesn't break. And then it's put out in the sun to turn golden brown, and then it's selected from there, and this is the final product. So I'm going to give this time over to my colleague, Narsamma. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jaka. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be comparing the I-Talitali RSD framework with the RSD framework that has been developed by John. I'll be looking at the third facet of I-Talitali framework, and as well as the third facet of RSD framework. My friend has taken you to the weaving area, to the raw material area to harvest the materials, and at the moment I am melting because I have brought in the raw materials, and so all of you are melting. The room is very hot. The processing of raw materials begins at this stage. The weavers then verify the raw materials they have collected, and they will check for the quality of the raw materials. They will check whether the raw materials are strong enough, because the raw materials for weaving builds the foundation of the mat. They also check for the size and the texture of the materials, because that tells the quality of the raw material. Similarly, students using the RSD framework has to select only the relevant materials for their research topic, because when they go out to the library, or when they go out surfing the materials on the internet, they just gather any information they get. They can just gather any journal they can get online that is just near to the topic question. So they just collect all the information, and then they have to sort and verify whether this journal is actually needed for my research. So in this process, they evaluate and they reflect, which means they sort out what relevant material is needed for my research. They also check for the credibility of the source, whether the journal that they have selected is credible, that they can use it in their writing. The credibility and reliability of the information is very important in the research process or in the writing of their assignment, because we as teachers, we look at the reference list and we check the information or the reference they have listed. Is it a good site? Is it a credible site? Who is the author? When was it published? So we check for all those things, because I remember when I did my PhD, my examiner looked on the year in which the references were, I would say, looked at the literature, looked at the publication as well, the year of publication. Was it a recent one, or was it 10 or 20 years back? So that is very important in the research process. The next, organize and manage, which is the fourth facet of the I-Talitali framework as well as the RSD framework. And in the I-Talitali we call it the Thuvana. And in the Thuvana process, the treatment and the storage of the raw material is very important. You can see that the diagram on the first diagram is similar to is the same as the diagram that my friend used. So the I-Talitali process, or in the I-Talitali process, the facets overlap. There is no such process or no such facet that stands on its own. Similarly, in the RSD framework, all the facets overlap. It does not stand on its own. So the treatment and the storage of raw materials such as kuta or reed or pandanus is taken into consideration. And in this process, we try and select the information in a very logical manner. You can see in the layering process, they are all layered according to the size as well as thickness. We also check for the additional raw materials that is needed. That is in the second diagram. In the weaving of the mat, we use wool, we use a string, and we check which color of the wool matches with the pattern. So that is very important. And in the RSD, the students need to organize the selected materials in a logical manner as per the topic question and as per the paragraphs they have planned. And the challenge for the student is not only to select the relevant information that answers the questions, but to phrase and rephrase or weave and reweave so that the sentence is meaningful and there is flow from the previous sentence or previous paragraph to the next paragraph. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Nas. I will talk about the final two sections of the RSD framework. The analysis and synthesis section of our research framework deals with creativity. Now, weaving is a complex and challenging process. It tests the critical thinking ability of the weaver to create patterns in the mind using the existing knowledge and incorporating the new knowledge gained through interaction. However, the indigenous and local Pacific Islanders are too familiar with a common creative age-old tradition of weaving. If they are not weaving, a weaved mat is a common sight for them. The size of the mat depends on the size of the islands they come from and the types of resources that are available to them depending on the geography. Therefore, the Melanesians and Polynesians, as you may have heard about Jitu talking about that, Melanesians and Polynesians, they weave larger mats, and the Micronesians smaller mats. But the concept of weaving is basically the same. So in contemporary weaving, the original material remains the key component, but introduced materials are incorporated to decorate them further and add value to them. So you can see I've got two pictures there. Weaving is very much a collective effort. Within these social interactions, they engage in singing, they recite poems and chants, they tell stories, they are sharing ideas, eating, drinking, gossiping, and they may also have arguments. This is very much a Pacific way of learning and teaching. Now, because Pacific Islanders do not have their own alphabets, reading and writing was foreign to them until English alphabets were introduced approximately 200 years ago. The Bible was the first book that was translated in indigenous language. In our experience as UU 204 teachers, English concepts and words still remain very foreign to many of them. We feel that the incorporation of the common social practice of weaving through participation, observation, and sharing in the education process would produce better researchers. Now, similar to weaving process, an issue or topic is magnified, narrowed, turned upside down, divided and reassembled, all to give the researcher an interesting way to approach and complete a project. Next slide is a communication apply, which is the final product. It should reflect the ethical, social, and cultural aspect, be it a mat for a wedding gift, or funeral, or clothing. I won't go through all that. You can read all that later on. So you see, Pacific weavers already know how to do, and to do it pretty automatically, which means that the generative process for them compose and communicate constructive visions of the world, reflecting the ideas in a good research paper, which should have a structure, pattern, cohesion between the paragraphs. I just want to go through this one, sorry. The last slide. Yeah, very quickly. Now, just have a look at that mat. It's a very small mat from Marshall Islands. Komol means thank you in Marshall Islands. So they were thanking me for this, and they weave this mat. How I read this mat? It tells me about the vulnerability of the small island nations. The brown bit reminds me of the sand I walked in. The green represents the little vegetation on the island. The few treasured flowers bleeds my heart of the food security issues. The blue on the right side reminds me of the calm lagoon and the children playing in it. The blue on the left creates a fear in me of the roaring open sea that may flood the little piece of land and splash it out, wash it all away, wash all the happy souls away forever. This is the story of my lovely Marshallese students, recited to me in a weaved mat. Thank you.